My name is Alara. I'm a photographer. But I don't shoot flashy weddings or glossy portraits. My world is black and white. I find poetry in the geometry of London bridges, in rain trickling down the glass of an old pub, in a lonely figure on a bench in Hyde Park. I believe that by removing color, you reveal the soul, structure, light, shadow, and truth. My life, like my photographs, has long been built on these principles: clean lines, clear composition, predictable contrast. And at the center of this precise composition was Liam. We lived in a cozy apartment in Notting Hill, with a bay window overlooking a quiet street lined with rows of pastel-colored houses. Our world smelled of freshly brewed coffee in the morning, his expensive sandalwood perfume, and the pages of old books that I loved to buy at Portobello Market. Liam was my opposite and my center of balance. He was a successful city lawyer, whose world was made up of numbers, deals, and strict deadlines. He was the color in my monochrome world: his loud laugh, his energy, his ambition that burned so brightly that sometimes I wanted to close my eyes. I loved him. I loved him passionately, deeply, with that all-consuming love that makes you believe you've finally found the missing piece of your soul. I loved the way he could talk about a complex merger one minute and then quote Shakespeare the next. I loved his hands, which could confidently sign multi-million-dollar contracts and then gently stroke my hair in the evening. He was my perfect frame, my masterpiece, which I never tired of studying. Our life seemed as immutable to me as the centuries-old stones of the tower. I thought I knew all his shades of gray, all his halftones. I was wrong. I didn't know that a new, poisonous color had appeared in his palette, one that would soon burn our picture to the ground. Our meeting was as chance as a rare, lucky moment. 5 years ago, I was sheltering from a sudden London downpour under the awning of a bookshop in Covent Garden. He jumped out of a taxi, umbrellaless, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that immediately began to darken with the raindrops. He laughed when he saw my disgruntled face, looking up at the gray sky. "London wouldn't be London without this, would it?" he said. And that's how it all began. Our relationship was built on contrasts. He brought the noise of the big world to my quiet life, and I brought peace and meaning to his. In the evenings, he would talk about corporate battles, and I would show him my new work, explaining why the shadow of a lamppost can speak louder than 1,000 words. He taught me to appreciate fine wine, and I taught him to notice the beauty in a crack in the pavement. We were different planets orbiting the same planet, creating a perfect system. Our home was our sanctuary. The walls were covered with my work, and his heavy law books sat on the shelves next to my photography albums. We created our own rituals: Sunday brunches at a little cafe around the corner, long walks along the Thames in the evenings, watching old movies under a blanket as the wind swept outside. Liam was incredibly attentive. He remembered my favorite tea and knew what music helped me focus while working in the darkroom. He supported my passion, which many considered frivolous. "You see the world like no one else, Alara," he would say, looking at my photographs. "You are my lens through which I see true beauty." Those words were more precious to me than any jewel. On our 5th anniversary, he proposed. It happened at the top of the London Eye, with the city sparkling beneath us with a million lights. He got down on one knee in that small glass booth and handed me a ring with a simple, elegant diamond. Of course, I said yes. I cried with happiness, and he laughed and kissed my salty cheeks. In that moment, I was absolutely, unconditionally happy. I thought we would be forever. The composition of my life was perfect: a controlled foreground, a clear perspective, harmonious light. I didn't notice how the shadows were deepening in the background, ready to engulf everything. The first changes were barely noticeable, like a slight blur in a photograph, the kind you might attribute to a shaky hand. It all started with Liam's new project, a major international deal that demanded his full commitment. He started working late. At first, it was once a week, then almost every day. He'd come home drained, smelling of office coffee and stress. Our evening conversations gave way to his tired silence. "Sorry, honey," he'd say, kissing the top of my head. My head's pounding. There's so much to keep in mind. I understood. I saw how passionate he was about this work, how important this success was to him. I tried to be supportive. I cooked his favorite dishes, didn't burden him with my problems, and created a peaceful atmosphere at home. Then a new name began to appear in his stories. Chloe. His colleague, a brilliant lawyer who'd been brought in to strengthen their team. Chloe came up with a brilliant strategy. Chloe and I spent the night working on documents. Chloe is a beast at negotiating. I admire her acumen. I didn't pay any attention to it. I was even glad he had such a strong ally. He started traveling more often. Brussels, Frankfurt, Zurich. He called every evening, but the conversations became increasingly formal. He talked about meetings, flights, but rarely asked about my day. I chalked it up to fatigue. I told myself I just needed to get through this difficult period. The deal would close and everything would return to normal. But something had subtly changed. He became more irritable. The slightest thing could set him off. My cup left on the coffee table, my question about his weekend plans. He increasingly buried himself in his phone, rapidly typing messages and smiling to himself. When I asked who he was texting, he brushed it off, work-related. Chloe sent me a funny meme about our clients. One evening, he returned especially late. He smelled not only of stress, but also of wine and the faint scent of women's perfume, not mine. "A drawn-out meeting with partners," he said, not looking me in the eye. We were celebrating a successful stage of negotiations. I remained silent. A cold, sticky worm of doubt settled inside me. I pushed it away, accusing myself of being suspicious and foolishly jealous. I trusted Liam. I loved him. He couldn't deceive me. My lens was trained on him, but I stubbornly refused to see what was already in focus. The epiphany wasn't like a flash of lightning. It crept up slowly, like an image developing on photographic paper in a darkroom, gradually coming into focus and overwhelming you with its inescapable truth. It all happened on a Saturday. Liam left for a work meeting out of town that had suddenly appeared on his schedule. I was left home alone. Trying to distract myself from the bad thoughts, I decided to tidy up. I sorted through things, washed and dusted. As I was changing the sheets, I felt something hard and cold on his side of the bed, under his pillow. It was an earring. One. Small, white gold, with a tiny sapphire. Elegant, expensive, and absolutely not mine. My hands shook. I sat up in bed, clutching that cold piece of metal in my palm. The world around me narrowed to that tiny blue dot. A whirlwind of thoughts raced through my head. Maybe it was an accident? Maybe he found it somewhere and simply put it in his pocket, and it fell out? But why under his pillow? Why didn't he tell me anything? I tried to find a logical explanation, clinging to any straw to keep from drowning in the swamp of horror that was sucking me in. I sat there for probably an hour, unable to move. And then a cold rage overcame me. I got up and went to his closet. I never allowed myself to rummage through his things, considering it humiliating. But now all inhibitions were gone. I started checking the pockets of his jackets. In the pocket of one of them, the one he was wearing the day before yesterday, I found a receipt from a jewelry store. The purchase had been made 3 weeks ago. 2 sapphire earrings. There was no doubt left. This wasn't a gift for me. My birthday was 6 months ago, and Christmas was still a long way off. And he wouldn't have hidden the gift under his pillow. He bought them for someone else. and that someone lost one of them. In our bed. I felt sick. I rushed to the bathroom and threw up. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Pale face, huge, terrified eyes. The woman in the mirror was unfamiliar. It wasn't Alara, the confident photographer, the happy bride. It was a deceived, crushed fool. At that moment, I remembered everything. His late returns, the smell of someone else's perfume, the smiles he'd directed at his phone screen, his sudden irritability. All these disparate details came together to form one ugly, monstrously clear picture. A picture of betrayal. The name Chloe popped into my head without warning. I didn't know if it was true, but my intuition screamed that I was right. His brilliant colleague, his comrade in arms. When Liam returned that evening, cheerful and relaxed, I was sitting in the living room in complete darkness. Alara? Why are you sitting in the dark? Did something happen? He asked, turning on the light. I stood up silently and held out the earring to him in my open palm. I will never forget the expression on his face. It was a mixture of horror, confusion, and guilt. He turned so pale that his freckles looked like splashes of dirt. He didn't ask what it was. He understood. At that moment, my perfectly constructed world collapsed, shattering into a million sharp pieces. The silence between us was deafening. It was oppressive, sucking the air from my lungs. Liam looked at the earring in my hand, then at my face, and I saw panic give way to despair in his eyes. Alara, I can explain everything, he muttered. The voice he used to close million-dollar deals now sounded pathetic and uncertain. Explain? My voice was calm, but this calm was akin to the calm before a storm. You want to explain to me how someone else's earring ended up in our bed, Liam? Go ahead, I'm all ears. I sat down in the chair, feeling my knees tremble. I wanted to scream, smash the dishes, claw at his face with my nails. But instead, I just sat and looked at him, at the man I thought I knew better than anyone in the world, who in an instant had become a stranger to me. He knelt before me. It was so theatrical, so false, that it made me even more disgusted. Forgive me, he whispered, trying to take my hands. I pulled them away. Forgive me, Alara. I'm terribly guilty. It was a mistake. Just one mistake. One mistake? I smiled bitterly. And the receipt for 2 earrings 3 weeks ago, was that part of that one mistake, too? Don't lie to me, Liam. At least have the courage not to lie now. He lowered his head. It happened a few times, he managed to squeeze out. It doesn't mean anything. It just happened. I was under pressure, work, stress. Don't you dare blame it on work. I couldn't hold back any longer, and my voice broke into a scream. You cheated on me in our house. In our bed. With whom? Was it Chloe? He flinched, and that was the answer. Oh, my God, Liam. Chloe? Your coworker? How could you? How long has this been going on? A couple of months, he replied quietly. Alara, I love you. Only you. What happened with her was just a blur. It meant nothing. I wanted to end it. I swear, I was going to tell her. His words were like salt in the wound. Does he love me? If he loved me, he would never have done this. Love isn't words. It's actions. And his actions screamed betrayal. You don't understand. I stood up and began pacing the room, trying not to explode. It's not about sex, Liam. It's about the lies. Every time you said you were working late, you lied. Every time you kissed me before leaving, you lied. Every time you said you loved me, you lied. Our whole life these past few months has been one big lie. I wasn't lying when I said I loved you. He jumped up too. I'm confused. Yes, I acted like a total jerk, I know. But I don't want to lose you. We can fix this. We'll get through this. I'll end this with her, right now. I'll call her in front of you. Don't, I stopped him. This won't change anything. You ruined everything, Liam. You destroyed my trust. And without trust, there's nothing. I can't be with someone who looks me in the eye and lies. I can't sleep in a bed where you were with someone else. I can't live in a house that's soaked in your lies. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but I didn't notice them. I felt only emptiness. A huge black hole where my heart used to be. What do you want to say? He asked, frightened. I'm leaving, I replied. Today. I can't stay here anymore. I went into the bedroom and got out my suitcase. He followed me, begging, crying, promising that everything would change. But I didn't hear him. I mechanically threw things into the suitcase, clothes, books, my camera. I looked at the photograph of us together on the bedside table, us, happy, on the coast in Cornwall. I picked up the frame and threw it hard on the floor. The glass shattered into tiny pieces. Just like my life. I left, leaving him alone in the ruins of our world. I called a taxi and went to my friend Sophia's, not paying attention to the road, not seeing anything through a haze of tears. London outside the window was a blur. My perfect black and white world was ruined. Someone had spilled acid on it, and now, in place of the crisp lines and harmonious shadows, there was only pain, corroding everything in its path. The first weeks after leaving Liam were like being underwater. Sounds were muffled, movements were slow, and breathing was difficult. I stayed with Sophia, my best friend, who took me in without asking, wrapped me in a blanket, and simply was there. She didn't offer advice or judge Liam. She simply made me tea, made sure I ate, and took me for walks when I hadn't left my room for days. I couldn't work. My camera, an extension of my hands and eyes, lay in its case. The thought of looking at the world through a lens seemed unbearable. I used to look for harmony and structure in the world, but now I saw only chaos and destruction. Everything seemed fake. The smiles of passers-by, the laughter of children in the park, couples in love, all of it filled me with irritation and pain. Liam bombarded me with messages and calls. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready for the conversation. What could he say that could change anything? His words had lost all meaning. One day, he came to Sophia's house. She wouldn't let him in, saying I needed time. I heard his voice outside the door, begging me to come out. I sat on the floor, covering my ears with my hands, rocking back and forth like crazy. I constantly replayed our last months in my head, looking for signs I'd missed. His every word, his every glance now took on a new, ominous meaning. I felt like a blind, deaf idiot. How could I not see? How could I have been so naive? Self-blame gave way to fits of rage, and then to waves of such all-consuming melancholy that I just wanted to disappear. The world was divided into before and after. In the before world, I was happy, loved, and confident in my future. In the after world, I was a nobody. I lost more than just the man I loved. I lost myself, my faith in people, the future we'd planned so carefully. Our failed wedding, the house we'd dreamed of buying, the children we'd wanted, it all turned to ashes. Sophia was my salvation. One day, she simply placed my camera in my hands. Go, she said. Go and take all your pain away. Transform it into what you do best. Otherwise, it will eat you up inside. I obeyed. I went outside and wandered aimlessly through the city. I reached Waterloo Bridge. It was a gray, windy day. I looked at the murky water of the Thames, the heavy clouds, the people hurrying about their business. And then I picked up my camera. I started shooting. I photographed the cracks in the asphalt, the rust on the railings, the reflection of the gloomy sky in the puddles. I photographed ugliness, destruction, imperfection. I no longer sought harmony. I documented chaos. And, strangely enough, it brought relief. Each click of the shutter was like an exhalation. I exhaled my pain, turning it into black and white images. My life was like a negative immersed in developer. The image emerged slowly, painfully, and I still had no idea what would ultimately end up in the picture. Several months passed. The pain didn't go away, but it was no longer sharp and stabbing. It became a dull, aching ache, like a chronic illness. I moved out of Sophia's house and rented a tiny studio in Islington. It was the beginning of a new life. A life without Liam. I continued taking photographs. My style changed. My work became darker, more edgy, but it acquired a new depth. I created a whole series called Scars of the City, about the imperfections of London that are often overlooked. It was my therapy. One day, I was sitting in a small cafe, reviewing my footage on my laptop, when a man approached me. "Excuse the intrusion," he said. "I happened to see your work. It's incredible. Very powerful." I looked up. Before me stood a man in his 40s, graying at the temples and kind, intelligent eyes. "Thank you," I replied, a little embarrassed. "My name is Julian," he introduced himself. "I own a small gallery around the corner. Have you ever thought about an exhibition?" That's how I met Julian. He was the complete opposite of Liam. Quiet, thoughtful, a little melancholy. He didn't talk about deals or deadlines. He talked about art, books, music. He didn't try to impress. He was simply himself. He helped me organize my first solo exhibition. We spent a lot of time together, selecting works, developing a concept. He understood my work in a way no one else did, not even Liam. He saw in my dark photographs not just destruction, but the beauty of resilience, the poetry of imperfection. "You don't just photograph scars," he once told me. "You show that even after the deepest wounds, life goes on. And in that, there is hope." Our relationship developed slowly. It wasn't a passion that sweeps everything in its path. It was a gradual rapprochement between two people who know what pain is. He, too, had gone through a difficult divorce a few years ago. We talked for hours. For the first time, I told someone my whole story, without holding back. He listened without interrupting, and there was no pity in his gaze. There was only understanding. With Julian, I felt safe. Not the predictable, structured safety I once created with Liam. But a different kind. Safe to be myself. Vulnerable, imperfect, with my scars. He didn't try to fix me or make me forget it all like a bad dream. He accepted me for who I was. Liam tried to contact me several more times. He wrote that he had broken up with Chloe, that he had realized everything, that he wanted to take it all back. I read his last message and, without answering, blocked his number. The past should stay in the past. Some photographs cannot be restored. The exhibition was a success. Unexpectedly so. Lots of people came, including critics from art magazines, and even bought a few works. But that wasn't the most important thing for me. On the opening day, I stood in the corner of the room and watched people moving from photo to photo, peering into my black and white worlds. And I saw a response in their eyes. At the end of the evening, Julian came up to me. "I'm proud of you, Alara," he said quietly. He didn't hug me or kiss me. He simply stood next to me, and his presence was warmer than any hug. In that moment, I knew I was ready to move on. Not to forget, no. Such things are never forgotten. But to let go. The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I mounted my camera on a tripod, set the self-timer, and took a self-portrait. I wasn't trying to look beautiful or mysterious. I simply looked into the lens. Directly and honestly. When I developed the photo, I stared at it for a long time. A woman was looking back at me from the photograph. Her eyes no longer held the naive happiness they'd seen in the pictures with Liam. But they also lacked the all-consuming pain they'd seen 6 months ago. Her gaze held fatigue, wisdom, and strength. There were shadows on her face, but there was also light. This was me. The real me. Imperfect. With my scars. But alive. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe Julian and I will work it out. Or maybe not. I no longer make plans or try to create the perfect composition. I've realized that life isn't a static snapshot. It's a process. A process of development, where you never know what the final image will turn out like. My world is still black and white. But I've learned to see more nuances in it. I've realized that the most important things happen not in bright light or absolute darkness, but in the midtones. In that complex, ambiguous realm where light battles shadow. It's there, on the border where light ends and darkness begins, that real, unfeigned life is born. And I was finally ready to focus on it.